Bienvenido a Noche de Pesadillas, cuando el día muere y la oscuridad toma el control. Las pesadillas despiertan para adueñarse de tu mente. Cada susurro trae consigo una historia más terrorífica que la anterior. Y cada sombra proyectada por la luna esconde un secreto oscuro que espera ser revelado. Aquí no existen escapatorias ni refugios seguros. Solo relatos que penetrarán en tu alma y harán latir tu corazón al ritmo del terror absoluto. Prepárate, porque esta noche tus peores miedos cobrarán vida y te atraparán sin piedad hasta el amanecer. A fissure in the city's electric skin, the alley beckoned. A slash of shadow promising swift passage. Tonight, lateness gnawed, a familiar anxiety sharpened by the looming deadline of my shift at the Night Owl Cafe. Prudence whispered caution, a mantra learned young, yet urgency screamed louder. Just this once. The thought, flimsy as hope, dissolved as the darkness inhaled me. How much could go wrong? The answer awaited in the enveloping gloom. 6 months I'd navigated the nocturnal rhythm of the Night Owl Cafe, trading sleep for tuition, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the distant promise of graduation. The 20-minute trek from my cramped apartment was usually a buffer, a transition. But tonight, textbooks had held me captive. Equations blurring into panic as the clock sprinted ahead. Outside, the metropolis throbbed, a restless heart beating with honking horns and the siren song of late-night revelry spilling from bars. A river of faces flowed under the artificial daylight of street lamps. Ordinarily, this urban pulse might energize. Tonight, it only amplified the ticking clock and the imagined rasp of Artie's voice. Should tardiness be my crime, yet again. And there it was, the shortcut, a lean slice of blackness wedged between brick behemoths, shaving precious minutes from the journey. My mother's warnings echoed, dark passages, unseen threats. Spectral chaperones I usually obeyed, but desperation is a clumsy locksmith, forcing doors best left closed. A breath held tight, a step taken. Instantly the city's clamor muted, replaced by a profound hush, punctuated by the metronome of dripping water, the furtive scuttle of unseen life. The air grew dense, cloying with the miasma of refuse, and an unplaceable metallic tang. My own footfalls became overloud companions on the slick pavement. Faster. Get through. Midway down this brick-lined throat, another rhythm intruded. Footfalls, heavier, more deliberate than my hurried cadence. A spike of adrenaline, sharp and cold. Just someone else, I reasoned, the thought thin against rising dread. But the sound doubled, then tripled. A furtive glance back confirmed the fear coalescing in my gut. 3 silhouettes detached themselves from the deeper shadows, moving with a predator's unhurried certainty. My blood turned to ice water. My pace quickened, transforming walk into near run. The alley's exit, a distant rectangle of light, seemed to recede with every step. Their steps matched mine, heavier now. The pretense of casualness dropped. A voice, coarse and laced with mockery, scraped the silence. Where's the fire, little bird? Ignore it. Keep moving. Focus on the light. Then a grip like iron clamped onto my arm, wrenching me backward. I stumbled, spun, confronting them. 3 faces swam into focus under the scant light filtering from above. eyes like chips of flint, mouths curved into predatory grins. "Ignoring folks ain't polite," the one holding me rasped, his breath a foul mix of stale liquor and smoke. I twisted, but his grasp was absolute. "Please." The word felt fragile, inadequate. "I'm late. I don't want any trouble." Laughter bounced off the grimy walls, harsh and devoid of humor. "Hear that?" The leader jeered. "No trouble wanted. Shame." He shoved me flat against the cold, damp brick, his face uncomfortably close. "The bag, now. And maybe you walk away." My fingers tightened instinctively on the strap. Inside, wallet, keys, yes. But also the heavy weight of knowledge. Textbooks, notes, the currency of my future, my exam tomorrow. No. The word surprised me with its solidity. His eyes narrowed to slits. "Not a request, sweetheart." As his hand lunged for the bag, something fractured within me. The paralysis, the fear. A surge, hot and fierce, displaced the cold dread. Victimhood was a garment I suddenly refused to wear. My knee drove upward, connecting sharply. A choked gasp, a doubling over. In that instant of broken rhythm, I pushed past his crumpled form and fled. Curses erupted behind me, frantic pounding echoing my own frantic flight. Adrenaline was a wildfire in my veins, lending impossible speed to my legs. The alley mouth beckoned, a promise of light and witnesses. Closer, closer. A hand snagged the back of my shirt, momentum nearly sending me sprawling. I regained my footing, whirling to face another pursuer, his face contorted with rage, arm raised to strike. Instinct took over. My bag, weighted with academia's dense truths, became a pendulum. I swung it with every ounce of desperate strength. The impact against his skull was a sickening, solid thump. He reeled, stunned. Again, I ran, lungs screaming, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The street, people, bathed in the mundane glow of streetlights, their ordinary evening about to be shattered. "Help!" The cry tore from my throat as I erupted from the alley's confines onto the comparative safety of the pavement. Heads swiveled. Conversations paused. Behind me, the sounds of pursuit faltered, then faded entirely as my assailants dissolved back into the obscurity they'd emerged from. A woman's arm wrapped around my trembling shoulders, a solid, grounding presence. Her companion, phone already pressed to his ear, scanned the dark moor I'd just escaped. The immediate danger had passed. Safe. For now. The following hour dissolved into a surreal tableau of flashing lights, uniforms, and the careful recitation of violation. Questions blurred, concern offered by strangers. By the time I reached the Night Owl Cafe, the clock mocked me. Over an hour past my start time. Artie, usually poised to deliver a lecture on punctuality, took one look at my ravaged state, the lingering police cruiser outside, and his customary gruffness evaporated. "Saints alive, Ilara," he murmured, guiding me toward a worn vinyl booth. "Shift's the last thing. Sit. Coffee's coming." Clutching the warm mug, the strong, bitter coffee a small anchor in the storm still raging inside, my hands betrayed a tremor I couldn't quell. The what-ifs played on a loop, a fraction slower, a moment more of paralyzing fear, a less potent defense. But the script had deviated. Faced with the abyss, some unknown reserve had surfaced. I hadn't crumpled. I had struck back, survived. Justice, in the form of captured assailants, remained elusive. The men vanished back into the city's labyrinth. Yet in the days and weeks that unfurled, I made a conscious choice. Fear would not be my jailer. Self-defense classes taught me leverage and awareness. Pepper spray became a constant companion in my pocket. And yes, shortcuts through shadowed passages were permanently struck from my mental map. But I walked. I studied. I moved toward the future I was building. That night forged a hard-won truth. The world holds teeth and darkness, yes, but within us resides a resilience often untapped until tested. The refusal to be defined by victimhood became its own quiet armor. Sometimes even now, the memory surfaces, triggered by the late hour, the particular slant of shadow down a narrow way, the phantom echo of terror, the frantic pulse of adrenaline. They linger. But louder still is the recollection of that pivot point, the instant defiance flared against despair, the discovery of a power wholly unexpected. It is a lesson etched deep. Even consumed by darkness, we possess the flint and steel to spark our own light. Years have passed. The Night Owl Cafe is a memory, replaced by the commute to an office where daylight reigns. When my path takes me near that specific fissure between buildings, fear is absent. Instead, a quiet surge of pride arises. Pride for the terrified young woman who clawed her way back from the brink, who refused the narrative written for her by violence. The journey since has been long. Life inevitably presents its own shadowed paths, its own ambushes. But the enduring truth remains. Avoidance isn't the victory. The victory lies in knowing that when darkness finds us, we carry the means to navigate through, to push back, to emerge into the light. That fierce, internal luminescence, no shadow can truly quench it. The resonance of voices, phantom echoes in the derelict corridors of Blackwood Asylum. That was the precise instant the thrill curdled into terror. A venture conceived in the hubris of exploration became the genesis of a haunting that clings to me still. My name is Elias. For years, the siren song of forgotten spaces, the chiaroscuro beauty of ruin captured through my lens, had been my obsession. Countless husks of buildings had yielded their secrets to my trespassing gaze, but none whispered of the abyss awaiting me within Blackwood's decaying embrace. Blackwood Asylum, shuttered for more than a decade, sprawled like a diseased carcass on the city's fringe. Its sheer scale, a labyrinth of 5 crumbling stories, whispered legends among urban explorers. It was the unholy grail. Months I'd plotted this incursion, awaiting the cloak of a new moon. Breaching its perimeter felt almost anticlimactic. A warped plank beside a ground floor window offered passage. Inside, the air hung thick, a tapestry woven from dust motes and the cloying perfume of rot. My flashlight carved a blade through the gloom, illuminating peeling frescoes of paint and skeletal remains of medical apparatus. For an hour, the desolation was sublime. I documented a forsaken nursery, its observation glass miraculously intact. Vacant cribs standing sentinel like skeletal soldiers. In a disheveled administrative office, patient histories lay strewn, their brittle pages disintegrating beneath my cautious touch. The cavernous cafeteria held stacks of trays, poised for spectral meals eternally deferred. It was on the 3rd floor, amidst the chilling geometry of what seemed a former psychiatric ward, that the silence fractured. A voice, ethereal yet distinct, drifted from the upper reaches. I froze, a frantic drumbeat commencing in my chest. Imagination, surely. The wind sighing through broken panes. Then again, louder. 2 voices now, masculine and feminine, locked in a sharp, indistinct quarrel. The words remained elusive, lost in the vastness, but the venomous intensity was unmistakable. Every nerve screamed retreat, urged me back towards the compromised window, towards the anonymity of my car. Yet a treacherous curiosity, the explorer's bane, held me fast. Perhaps other trespassers, I rationalized, kindred spirits drawn to the decay, or vagrants seeking refuge in the asylum's upper strata. Regardless, the ambiguity demanded resolution. I ascended the staircase, each protesting groan of the aged timber amplifying my heartbeat. As I crested the 4th floor landing, the voices sharpened, emanating from behind imposing double doors, labeled Surgical Amphitheater. Placing my ear against the cold wood, the fragments coalesced into coherence. Cannot sustain this, Marcus. The woman's voice spat, laced with desperation. Discovery is inevitable. Calm yourself, Cora, the man countered, his tone steeped in casual arrogance. This sanctuary has served us for months. It remains untouched, forgotten. But the risk? What if someone intrudes? What if... Then, he interjected, his voice hardening. We address the intrusion, as we always have. An icy dread snaked down my spine. These were no mere squatters, no fellow devotees of ruin. This was something clandestine, dangerous. Retreat was no longer an option, but an imperative. I pivoted, but in my urgency, my elbow struck a metal basin perched precariously on a nearby gurney. It plummeted, its clangorous impact reverberating, a deafening violation of the sepulchral silence. Behind the doors, the voices ceased abruptly. Silence stretched, taut and menacing, then erupted into the sharp tattoo of approaching footsteps. Viscid panic surged, obliterating caution. I hurled myself down the corridor, heedless of the cacophony my flight produced. The double doors behind me exploded inwards. "You! Halt!" a voice roared. I ran with a desperation previously unknown, devouring the stairs in frantic leaps. Their pursuit was relentless, the sound of their steps echoing mine, drawing closer. Rounding a landing on the 2nd floor, fingers snagged my jacket. I wrenched violently, the tearing fabric a small price for freedom, and plunged back through the window I'd entered, landing awkwardly on the weed-choked grounds. My car, secreted a block away beneath sheltering oaks, felt impossibly distant. I reached it, breath sobbing, keys fumbling against the lock as shouts pursued me through the darkness. Pulling away, a frantic glance in the rearview mirror captured 2 silhouettes spilling from the asylum's maw. Even attenuated by distance, the moonlight caught a cruel glint in the man's hand, the unmistakable outline of a firearm. Hours bled into one another on the road, sheer terror my co-pilot. Every pair of headlights blooming in my mirror sent jolts of adrenaline through my system. Only the nascent blush of dawn granted me the courage to pull into a desolate rest stop, my hands trembling as I killed the engine. What infernal secret had I unearthed? Narcotics? Trafficking? Some unholy commerce thriving in the asylum's corpse? Whatever its nature, I had blundered far beyond my depth. The police? The thought flickered, then died. How could I articulate the situation, admit to trespassing, to eavesdropping on whispers in a condemned building? And the man, Marcus. His confidence suggested impunity, perhaps connections. Months, he'd said. They operated undisturbed. Prudence dictated silence, disappearance. I feigned illness, canceling work, entombing myself in my apartment, attempting to weave a fragile narrative of anonymity. They hadn't seen me clearly, hadn't noted my car. But the ensuing days unraveled that delusion. Subtle shifts in my apartment's arrangement hinted at intrusion. Digital footprints appeared on my computer, trails I hadn't made. Twice the same nondescript sedan seemed tethered to my bumper during brief, necessary excursions for supplies. Paranoia coiled like a serpent in my gut. Sleep became a luxury, punctuated by phantom noises. My phone went unanswered, emails unread. Friends' worried inquiries met silence. The shame and fear were insurmountable barriers. A week drifted past, heavy with unspoken dread. Then returning home, I found my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pushed it open. Chaos greeted me, drawers disgorged, furniture overturned, a violation palpable in the air. Yet strangely, nothing tangible seemed missing, except placed with deliberate care upon my kitchen table lay a single sheet of paper. The neatly penned script chilled me to the bone. We know who you are. We know where you live. Silence is your only sanctuary. Next time, we won't be so considerate. That was the fracture point. A hastily packed bag, a drained bank account, the open road. Days dissolved into a blur of asphalt, fitful sleep in the back seat, transactions conducted solely in cash. My phone, my cards, every tether to my former life, severed. 3 months have passed since that night bled into nightmare at Blackwood Asylum. I exist now in a small, forgettable town, leagues removed from my past, washing dishes under an assumed name. Dyed hair, a cultivated beard, flimsy camouflage against an omnipresent threat. Safety remains an illusion. Each diner patron entering the Greasy Spoon could be an emissary of my pursuers. Every lingering vehicle a potential harbinger. Sleep offers little respite, haunted by fragmented replays of the operating theater. The chase, the glint of steel. This fugitive existence cannot last. Eventually, confrontation seems inevitable, perhaps involving authorities far removed from my city's potential corruption. But for now, motion is survival. Vigilance, my constant companion. The allure of urban exploration, once a driving force, now seems a fool's errand, its thrill hollowed out by the knowledge of the tangible dangers nesting in those neglected corners. Some secrets, I've learned with brutal finality, are best left undisturbed. Some thresholds never crossed. As I commit these words to paper in this transient room, the velocity of life's derailment astounds me. One moment's surrender to curiosity, one ill-fated decision, can unravel the entirety of one's existence. Let this chronicle serve as a testament, a warning to any soul tempted by the romance of ruin. The darkness within abandoned places harbors more than dust and decay. Sometimes the true perils are not spectral remnants of the past, but the flesh and blood entities guarding their present-day secrets with lethal intent. What future awaits? A return home? A moment's peace? These questions plague my waking hours and infiltrate my dreams. Yet one certainty remains. I will never again mistake emptiness for safety. The most potent dangers often fester where the world he leaves only ghosts reside. So, should you ever feel the pull towards that fractured window, that chained gateway, recall my journey. Remember that some thrills demand a devastating toll, and understand that in the theater of urban decay, the most dangerous specters are those still breathing, concealed within the shadows. The cardboard box beside me exhaled warmth, a ghost of garlic and oregano that normally sharpened my appetite. Tonight, though, threading the labyrinthine lanes of this moneyed enclave, a nameless dread coiled low in my gut. Little did I fathom this ordinary run would unravel into a terror destined to echo through my waking thoughts for years. Leo, that's me. 6 months slinging pies for Sal's Pizzeria. Hardly a calling, but it keeps the lights on while I wrestle with my studies. Mostly it's just me, the weary groan of my sedan, and the endless grid of sleeping suburbs. But this evening deviated. The destination itself felt anomalous, withdrawn from the curb, swaddled in deep shade. A dead porch lamp, peculiar for expecting food. As my boots crunched the gravel path, an electric prickle traced my spine. An intuition, cold and sharp, wrong. My thumb found the bell, a muted, hollow sound swallowed by the house's interior. Silence answered, a heavier rap. Sal's Pizzeria, delivery. Just as retreat began to beckon, the portal groaned inward. A figure occupied the gap, face fractured by shadow. Gaunt, tall, sporting a ragged beard, his gaze pinned me like an insect. Your order from Sal's, I managed, stretching my lips into a semblance of a smile. Comes to 1850. He inclined his head, retreating slightly, a silent invitation inward. Protocol screamed, no, but an unnerving pressure in his stillness paralyzed refusal. The instant my foot cleared the frame, the door slammed shut behind me, a resonant thump. The interior was cavernous, starved of light, furnished with ghosts of objects. He steered me toward what might have been a lounge, barely discernible in the gloom. Remain here, he rasped, the sound like stones grinding. Then he vanished into an adjoining darkness, abandoning me with the cooling pizza, its familiar scent now tinged with menace. Time stretched, thin and brittle. The quiet pressed in, punctuated only by the metronomic tick of some unseen clock. Anxiety began its insidious crawl. This was fundamentally wrong. Depositing the pizza onto a dust-filmed side table, I ventured, "Sir, your dinner's cooling." Emptiness replied, a cautious step toward the passage he'd taken, and then the whisper of movement behind. I spun. He stood there, but the equation had changed. A dark shape rested heavy in his grip. A pistol, unwavering, aimed square at my chest. My pulse detonated against my ribs. "Hey, easy," I stammered, palms lifting instinctively. "No problems here." "Sit!" The command sliced through the gloom, sharp and glacial. I sank onto the threadbare sofa, thoughts scrambling like frantic birds. What abyss had I stumbled into? The weapon remained locked on me, his stare relentless. "Any idea why you've come?" he inquired, the question laced with venom. A slow shake of my head, fighting to leash the tremor in my voice. No clue, just bringing the food. A contemptuous curl twisted his lips. "Your employer, Sal." He obliterated my existence. "Tonight, you become the instrument of my retribution." Sal? Kindly, bustling Sal from the pizzeria? How could he be connected to this grim figure? The man began to prowl the confined space, the gun a constant, menacing presence. He spat words like poison darts, tales of betrayal, financial ruin, fractured kin, all laid at Sal's feet. His monologue was a torrent of fury and curdled resentment. I fought for composure, but terror had its claws deep inside me. Escape felt imperative, yet he was a volatile storm, armed and cornered. My eyes darted, seeking leverage, an exit, anything. He saw the flicker. "Abandon the thought," he cautioned, the gun gesturing emphatically. "Your departure awaits my satisfaction." A deep inhalation, forcing clarity through the panic. "Listen, I'm just the delivery guy. I'm outside whatever happened with Sal. Maybe there's another way?" His head oscillated, knuckles whitening on the pistol's grip. "Negative. You are merely collateral. But, hey, Sal will settle his account." He resumed his restless circuit, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Urgency screamed. My gaze snagged on a substantial ceramic lamp perched on an end table, just within arm's length. The solitary option. I coiled, waiting for that fractional turn of his back. Now. I launched myself, snatching the lamp's base, swinging it with adrenaline-fueled force. It struck his temple with a sickening thud. He reeled, the pistol clattering to the floorboards. No time for assessment. I snatched the fallen weapon, lunging for the exit. My heart hammered against my ribs. The lock resisted my trembling fingers. It took 2 frantic attempts before the mechanism yielded. I burst into the night air, sprinting toward my sedan, slamming the door, thumbing the locks. Shakes racked my hands, making the ignition a clumsy battle. Finally, the engine caught with a desperate roar. A glance in the rear view revealed the man, staggering onto the porch, hand clamped to his bleeding head. I jammed the accelerator, tires spitting stones as I clawed my way back to the street. I flew back toward town, the sedan eating up the miles, my thoughts a chaotic storm of adrenaline and residual terror. Reaching Sal's, I practically fell through the entrance, startling the proprietor mid-lockup. "Leo? Saints alive, what happened? You look spectral," Sal exclaimed, concern etching lines on his forehead. My knees buckled. I found a nearby chair just as my legs surrendered. Fragmented sentences tumbled out between ragged breaths, painting the night's horror. Sal's complexion turned ashen as I relayed the man's bitter accusations. "Dio mio," Sal breathed, collapsing heavily into the opposite seat. "I didn't believe... not this." "You know him?" The question was sharp with disbelief. Sal nodded, his gaze fixed on some painful memory. Victor, we were partners, Leo. A lifetime ago. It ended badly, poisonously. But this I never foresaw. A strange confluence of emotions washed over me. Relief that the terror wasn't arbitrary madness, mingled with a hot surge of anger that Sal's unresolved history had nearly cost me everything. Police, I stated, my hand already moving toward my pocket. We have to call them. Sal nodded, seeming to age years in that instant. Yes, you're correct. A call long overdue. The ensuing hours dissolved into a haze of flashing lights, official inquiries, and the careful bagging of the pistol as evidence. Assurances were made about apprehending Victor. As the adrenaline ebbed, the true gravity settled, heavy and cold. A persistent tremor occupied my hands. Sudden sounds made me flinch violently. Sal insisted on driving me home, a litany of apologies spilling from him. Leo, I am profoundly sorry. You should never have been entangled in this wreckage. I offered a weary nod. Energy reserves depleted. At my apartment building, Sal paused before I exited, his expression grave. Take leave, Leo. On the clock. And should you choose not to return, there would be no judgment. I considered it. The thought of navigating dark streets again sent a chill through me. Yet beneath the fear, a peculiar ember of pride glowed. I had confronted mortal peril and emerged. I had bested an armed man through sheer will. I'll consider it, I replied eventually. Sleep offered no refuge that night. Eyes fixed on the shadowed ceiling, the reel of events played relentlessly. Victor's haunted eyes, the chilling weight of the gun, the resonant impact of ceramic on bone. It felt utterly unreal. A film witnessed, not endured. But as days bled into a week, a transformation began. The sharp edges of fear softened, yielding to an unexpected resilience. I had looked into the abyss and not blinked. What future trial could truly unman me now? A week after the incident, I pushed open the door to Sal's pizzeria. Sal's head snapped up, surprise widening his eyes. Leo, you're certain about this? I nodded, already reaching for the next waiting ticket. Positive. But Sal, I added, a wry twist to my lips. Next time vengeance comes knocking in the form of a disgruntled associate, perhaps a memo to the driving staff. A relieved chuckle escaped Sal. Consider it policy. Stepping back out to the weathered sedan, pizza carrier warm in my grip, the air felt charged differently. Darkness still cloaked the world. The streets remained anonymous labyrinths, yet the old apprehension had dissolved, replaced by a quiet readiness. Whatever the night held, I felt equipped to meet it. The familiar perfume of garlic and tomato drifted from the box, no longer a herald of anxiety, but now the scent of possibility itself, of a life embraced with all its inherent risk and thrill. I turned the key, the engine humming to life. Pulling away from the curb, I merged with the flow, prepared for the unfolding hours. I wasn't merely Leo, the pizza guy, anymore. I was Leo, The survivor. This tale has resided solely within me, unspoken, yet its every facet remains etched sharp against memory. It unfolded one biting winter dawn, back when my life was tethered to that secluded acreage out in the hinterlands. Rising before the sun was ritual, boots pulled on, coat shrugged into, then out into the frigid air with my dog, Rook, for our constitutional. A simple rhythm, then. The stillness appealed, as did the spectacle of the moon suspended above the dormant fields. But that particular morning fractured my perception of the nascent hours irrevocably. I recall the air's keen edge, my exhalations ghosting white before me as we traced the perimeter of our land. Sul had yet to breach the horizon, leaving the sky steeped in that profound indigo that precedes true daylight. The earth beneath my boots was unyielding, frozen hard, carrying the scent of damp soil and the lingering kiss of night's dew. Rook padded faithfully beside me, nose questing along the ground, pausing intermittently, surveying our domain. He habitually forged a few paces ahead, ears erect, a sentinel on silent patrol. The surrounding pastures lay hushed, save for the distant, tentative stirrings of awakening birds. We arrived at the dilapidated fence marking the boundary between our property and a dense thicket of brush and timber. Familiar territory, this. Its loosened planks offered easy passage onto a slender trail winding within. That copse always felt inherently darker, the trees crowding close, undergrowth encroaching thickly on either side. Rook never balked. He'd shoulder through the tangle and I'd follow, ducking low-hanging boughs. My flashlight usually remained dormant. The path was known by heart, by footfall. On this dawn, however, I veered onto a less trodden shortcut, one I'd navigated only sparingly before. It promised a more direct route to an open meadow beyond the woods. Here, the cold seemed to bite deeper. I could hear Rook's paws whispering through fallen leaves just ahead. The air hung utterly still. Each minute crunch, each twig snap, resonated with startling clarity. Then abruptly Rook froze. Utterly motionless, ears pricked ramrod straight, his tail stiffening into a rigid line. A knot tightened in my chest. I slowed, straining my ears against the profound silence. Nothing. Not the faintest rustle. My pulse began a frantic tattoo against my ribs, though I tried to dismiss the unease. "What is it, boy?" I murmured, the sound swallowed by the quiet. No bark, no growl. Just that taut, expectant stillness. Advancing a cautious step, my gaze swept the gloom, but the darkness yielded little. Reluctantly, I thumbed my flashlight to life. Its beam sliced through the murk, illuminating the narrow track before us. Initially just interwoven branches, leaf litter, perhaps clumps of tall, withered grass met the light. Then movement registered to my left, low behind a dense shrub. A dark form, hunched over. A stray dog, I reasoned, or perhaps a coyote, though they were scarce hereabouts. A clear view remained elusive. Rook emitted a low, distressed whine, shrinking back a pace, pressing his flank hard against my leg. I felt the involuntary clenching of my own muscles, adrenaline surging, hammering my heart against my bones. Slowly, deliberately, I eased forward, angling the flashlight's beam for a better perspective. The shape shifted. A patch of black fur came into focus, coarse, tangled, matted in ugly clumps. It seemed too substantial for a mere dog, yet lacked the sheer bulk of a bear. A gaunt wolf, perhaps, I rationalized, or some large stray roughed up by the wild. Then it turned. I glimpsed a face, or something approximating one, a definite muzzle, and two eyes that caught the light, reflecting it back as dull, jaundiced discs. My mouth turned instantly arid, my knees locked. Rook commenced a deep, guttural growl, a vibration I felt transmitted through my own leg. The entity held its position for a beat, seemingly assessing us, gauging the threat. Fear had rendered me immobile. I stood rooted, the flashlight trembling in my grasp, my breath snagged somewhere in my throat. Questions swirled frantically. Wolf? Escaped something? Diseased? But before any coherent action could form, it elevated its upper body. It rose onto its hind legs. This was wrong, utterly unnatural. The movement itself was fluid, devoid of any awkwardness or struggle for balance. It simply straightened, towering there, fixing its gaze directly upon me. Speech failed me. Even blinking felt impossible. My skin prickled with a sudden icy chill, while my heart pounded with such ferocity I thought my chest might splinter. Standing thus, the creature was tall, matching my own height at least. Its forelimbs dangled at its sides, yet seemed disproportionately long. Its head canted slightly, as if striving for a clearer appraisal. The thrum of my own blood roared in my ears. The acrid taste of panic flooded my mouth from ragged, shallow breaths. My entire being screamed, "Run!" But paralysis held sway. I could only stare. How long we remained locked in that tableau, I cannot say. Seconds, perhaps, or an eternity measured in heartbeats. I was conscious of Rook's sharp, panting breaths, the nervous shuffle of his paws on the dirt. Then, without preamble, the creature pivoted and stepped sideways into the dense undergrowth to the left. It remained upright, on two legs, shouldering aside branches as it vanished into the gloom. No grunt, no cry, only the receding whisper of disturbed foliage. It moved with unnerving speed, like someone intimately familiar with the unseen paths within the thicket. The instant it disappeared from sight, I sucked in a desperate gasp, realizing I'd been holding my breath. My limbs felt petrified, my brow slick with cold sweat despite the frigid air. Rook erupted into a volley of short, frantic barks that ricocheted through the timber. The sound jolted me from my stupor. I fumbled for his collar, my hand shaking so violently I nearly dropped the flashlight. Get out. Back to the house. Now. The nauseating, hollow sensation in my gut persisted. I willed my legs into motion. They felt leaden, clumsy, but I forced a quicker pace, turning back the way we came, practically towing Rook alongside me. He continued barking sporadically. I gave his collar gentle tugs, urging silence, unwilling to attract further notice from whatever that presence was. My mind relentlessly replayed the encounter. The matted fur, the hunched posture, the grotesque ascent onto two legs. Each mental image sent fresh jolts of adrenaline through me. I fought the urge to scan the trees, imagining the creature lurking behind every trunk, observing, poised. My chest constricted, breath coming short, so I fixed my gaze resolutely on the path ahead. The return journey felt immeasurably longer. The woods seemed to have drawn in, darker than before. The flashlight's beam appeared feeble, as if its power waned, though I knew it was merely my frayed nerves. Rook eventually fell silent, but remained plastered to my side, glancing nervously about, tail held low. I resisted the instinct to break into a run, telling myself a steady pace was safer. Less chance of falling, less chance of succumbing fully to panic. Yet inwardly, I yearned to sprint. When the familiar silhouette of the fence finally materialized through the trees, relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. The old, weathered planks seemed a sanctuary gate. I hastened towards the loose board, shoved it aside, and scrambled through. Rook needed no encouragement, darting after me, tail still clamped low. The open fields on our side of the boundary felt exponentially safer. Fewer trees, less concealment, and the distant outline of the house visible against the lightening sky. The heavens were paling now, transitioning to a washed-out gray. Soon sunrise would impose a veneer of normalcy. But at that moment, the fear clung to me like icy tendrils. I strode rapidly towards the house, casting frequent glances over my shoulder. Nothing stirred but a few crows lifting from a faraway fence post. The air smelled sharply of wet grass, and a damp chill seeped through my jacket. My body still trembled uncontrollably, making steady steps difficult. Rook remained quiet, panting softly, his gaze constantly roving. Reaching the door, I fumbled with the keys, my shaken fingers struggling with the lock. Finally, it yielded. I stumbled inside, the familiar quiet of the house engulfing me. I slammed the door shut, threw the bolt, and leaned heavily against it, breathing in ragged, shallow gasps, my skin clammy. Rook stayed near, looking up at me, ears still flattened. I knelt, stroked his head, attempting to soothe us both. My heart felt dangerously overwrought, a wild drum against my ribs. I remained there for several minutes, gathering myself, trying to process. Call someone? The authorities? Wildlife services? What conceivable report could I make? Saw a large, furry, bipedal thing. Derision, disbelief. That's what I'd face. Perhaps a cursory search. Perhaps nothing. Explaining it without sounding unhinged felt impossible. My mouth was parched, my throat constricted. A profound weariness settled over me. I rose, shed my boots by the door, and moved towards the kitchen. Water, gulped down hastily, did little to clear my head. The image persisted, the creature rising, those eyes reflecting my light. Each recollection sent a fresh tremor of fear through my stomach. Taking another deep, deliberate breath, I braced myself against the counter, striving for calm. Perhaps it was just a malformed animal. Perhaps fear had magnified its height, distorted its posture. Yet the profound wrongness of it felt undeniable. I methodically checked every door, every window, securing locks despite the encroaching daylight. I drew the blinds, needing to shut out the world, irrationally convinced something might still be watching from the tree line. Rook shadowed my every move, a furry, four-legged barometer of my own unease. Once the house felt secure, I retreated to the living room couch with him, simply staring at the wall for a long interval. Eventually, the sun crested the horizon. Pale light filtered through the slats of the blinds. lending the room a less menacing aspect. I risked a peek outside. The fields appeared unchanged, mundane. The sky was clear, brushed with the faint blush of dawn. Usually I cherished that morning light. That day it felt alien, insufficient. I kept half expecting to discern a dark silhouette moving through the tall grasses. Hours passed as I sat there, the encounter looping endlessly in my mind. A part of me felt compelled to return, to search for tracks, for any physical evidence to validate or refute my sanity. But a stronger, colder part recoiled, terrified of what confirmation might mean, terrified of another encounter. Curiosity warred with a primal fear I'd never known before. I attempted to impose routine upon the day. Fed Rook, tended to minor ranch tasks, went through the motions of chores. But my focus remained fractured. Every unexpected sound, the skitter of leaves, a distant dog's bark, drew a flinch. Rook, too, seemed altered. He stayed unusually close, foregoing his customary explorations, his ears perpetually half-cocked, listening. The thought of confiding in a neighbor surfaced, then submerged. A fleeting desire to know if anyone else had witnessed anomalies in the pre-dawn hours wrestled with the certainty of ridicule. It felt like a burden to be carried alone, a secret too strange to voice. Folks out here had their share of peculiar tales, usually dismissed as folklore or exaggeration. I had no desire to become the local eccentric, the man who saw monsters in the woods. Days bled into weeks. Life resumed its familiar cadence, albeit subtly altered. Rook and I continued our walks, but never again down that shortcut, never again through the dense woods. We kept to open ground, and always after the sun was well and truly up. I feigned normalcy, but tension became my shadow. An unfamiliar howl on the wind, a sudden movement glimpsed at the edge of my vision. These things could still freeze me in place. I never saw the creature again. Sometimes, gazing towards the dark band of timber along the horizon, I wonder if it remains, watching, or if it simply passed through. I no longer venture into the deep thickets alone, especially not near dawn, and the story remains untold to anyone nearby. I lack even a name for what I witnessed. It has been some time since that morning, yet the memory retains its visceral power. The texture of that matted fur, the impossible physics of its rising, the unsettling intensity in those reflected eyes. It behaved unlike any animal I know. There was an unnerving quality to it, something that hinted at sentience, perhaps. These are thoughts I keep locked away. I manage by not dwelling on the what of it. That is the entirety of the account. I've never revisited that specific spot deep within the woods. I have confided in no one local, nor do I intend to. Mostly I succeed in pushing it down, but occasionally in the liminal space of early morning, half awake, the image returns, tall, dark, bipedal, utterly out of place, and the fear resurfaces, potent and cold. It serves as a stark reminder that the wild holds mysteries, things that defy easy categorization. I don't profess to understand what I encountered. I only know what I saw. And that knowledge is enough to keep me glancing over my shoulder whenever I venture out before the sun. Stone, cold and unyielding. I'd always believed that implicitly. Tales of restless monuments, granite markers waltzing in the moonlight. Absurdities whispered by the credulous, until a dawn unlike any other shattered that conviction. The cemetery gates groaned open under my hand, a familiar pre-sunrise ritual honed over countless seasons. Yet as my gaze swept the familiar expanse, a dissonance prickled the edge of my perception. Certain headstones, sentinels of the departed, seemed subtly rearranged. An old man's memory, I chided myself, mistaking the familiar contours, imagination playing tricks in the liminal light. But later, lingering under a bruised twilight sky, scrutinizing the rows with newfound intensity, the truth settled cold and heavy. It was no phantom of the mind. Let me trace the path back. Silas is the name etched onto my employment records. Custodian of this modest necropolis for nearly a decade now. It's a sequestered place, nestled against the slumbering hem of town, rarely troubled by mourners save for the occasional pilgrimage to ancestral plots. My days are spent taming the wild grasses, clearing the winding pathways, preserving a facade of tranquil order. Digging new beds for the recently departed falls to me, too, though the earth here yields its secrets infrequently. Evenings conclude with the resonant clang of the main gate locking. A perimeter check along the fences. One final perambulation through the silent grounds. Roughly 3 weeks passed. The rhythm altered. I was tending to fallen leaves near the western boundary, a sector dominated by the oldest residents, their markers worn smooth by time and weather, inscriptions fading into whispers. A casual glance across the stones, a routine check. But intuition, sharp and sudden, insisted something was amiss. The spacing felt wrong, infinitesimal shifts creating an unfamiliar geometry. Not glaringly obvious, yet I know this particular stretch intimately. Its daily aspect imprinted on my mind. The precise proximity of each stone to the encroaching tree line. Dismissing it as a lapse, a trick of fading light or tired eyes, I bent back to my work, gathering leaves into rustling pyres, that strange disquiet churning beneath my ribs. That night, completing my final circuit, I deliberately tarried among those ancient graves. My flashlight beam cut a stark cone through the darkness, illuminating the weathered faces one by one. I recall the crisp bite of the air, the sibilant whisper of wind through skeletal branches. Standing motionless, I swept the light across the ranks of stone. They appeared steadfast, immutable. Locking the gate, I walked home, convinced I'd succumbed to overwrought fancy. The following dawn, however, revealed fresh scars marring the soft earth beside several of those very stones. Shallow gouges, the kind left when dense weight is dragged across yielding soil. Crouching, I examined them closer. The ground looked recently disturbed, as if a heavy bench or a substantial block had been scraped several feet. My eyes scanned for other signs, footprints, discarded debris, evidence of youthful vandalism, but found none. Only the inexplicable marks remained. From that point, vigilance became my watchword. Each morning arrival involved a meticulous survey, a mental charting of every monument's placement. Each evening departure, post-lockup, demanded another pass, a final inspection before yielding the grounds to the night. A small notebook became my constant companion, its pages filled with crude diagrams, sketches mapping the alignment of rows, the shapes and relative positions of individual stones. Within a week, denial was no longer sustainable. At least 4, perhaps 5, of the older markers were demonstrably migrating. Not seismic shifts, but incremental drifts, A few inches laterally here, a slight tilt or forward slide there, enough to disrupt the established order. Patterns emerged. Nocturnal movements favoring a westward drift one night, subtle rotations the next. By the second week, the phenomenon had spread, drawing more stones into its strange, silent choreography, coalescing into a peculiar cluster. I resolved to bear witness. One night, armed with a thermos of scalding coffee, a collapsible canvas chair, and my trusty flashlight, I secreted myself within the dilapidated storage shed near the back fence. Its single grimy window offered a vantage point overlooking the oldest section, yet kept me concealed. Inside, plunged into darkness, I waited. Hours crawled by. A cramp seized my leg. The pervasive chill seeped through my jacket layers. My own measured breathing, the dry rustle of unseen leaves, the distant yelp of a dog. These were the only sounds punctuating the profound silence. Around the second hour past midnight, I emerged, moving with painstaking quietness, creeping closer to the suspect rows. My heart hammered against my ribs. A film of cold sweat slicked my brow despite the frigid air. I stared intently. Nothing. Stillness reigned. Forcing patience, I hunkered down behind a substantial granite monument, its bulk offering concealment. The moon, a sliver, cast long skeletal shadows, rendering the stones as mere silhouettes against the gloom. An eternity seemed to pass, crouched there, thighs burning with the strain. Then I saw it. A headstone at the far right edge, indistinct in the dimness, executed a sudden, soundless lateral shift, perhaps 3 inches. My breath hitched, my pulse surged, a frantic drum against the silence. A primal urge to flee, warred with a desperate need to observe. Moments later, another stone, some 10 feet distant, tilted fractionally, sliding perhaps an inch forward. My fingers dug into the rough granite I hid behind, its chill biting into my palms. Before the uncanny ballet concluded, 4 or 5 markers had subtly rearranged themselves into a new configuration. Disbelief warred with the stark evidence before my eyes. Shaken, I struggled to commit the exact new positions to memory, my mind reeling. When I finally rose, legs stiff and numb, I swept my flashlight beam across the implicated stones. Their positions were undeniably altered from just hours before. The following morning, fortified by daylight, I consulted my notebook, meticulously mapping the changes. Comparing the new alignments to my previous records, a nascent pattern revealed itself. The shifts, aggregated over weeks, seemed to converge, hinting at a direction, pointing towards the far corner of the cemetery, dominated by an imposing old granite mausoleum. Drawn by this silent indication, I inspected the structure. Its heavy wrought iron gate remained securely locked. Circling it, I scrutinized the surrounding earth. All appeared undisturbed until, behind the mausoleum, I discovered a patch of soil distinctly looser, darker, fresher than the packed ground around it. Over subsequent nights, the meticulous recording continued. Each dawn revealed further rearrangements, the stones composing what increasingly resembled a fragmentary pathway. Some tilted definitively, their orientation an unambiguous pointer towards the mausoleum. Others formed a subtle curve, seeming to delineate the boundary around that patch of disturbed earth. A conviction grew. Something lay buried there, something the stones themselves were indicating. Choosing an afternoon devoid of visitors, I locked the gates, retrieved a shovel, and returned to the spot behind the mausoleum. The first thrust of the spade into the soil felt momentous, each scrape unnaturally loud in the stillness. My heart hammered, a frantic rhythm against the exertion. What lay beneath? Deeper I dug, perhaps 2 feet down, the earth yielding unevenly. Then the shovel struck something solid. A large rock, I assumed initially, but clearing the dirt revealed dark, damp wood. Not skeletal remains nor mere debris, but something constructed. A box, rectangular, bound with corroded iron bands. The wood, ancient and waterlogged, crumbled at my touch. Pausing, I leaned back, catching my breath, the thumping in my chest echoing the shovel's earlier impacts. What secrets did it hold? Carefully, I excavated around it. Roughly 3 feet long, a foot wide. Mud caked my gloves. Grunting with effort, I managed to wrestle it from the hole and onto the grass. Brushing away clinging soil, I discerned faint carvings on the lid, symbols eroded almost beyond recognition. Searching for a latch, I noted one iron band seemed looser. Using the shovel's edge as a lever, I applied pressure. With a groan of protesting rotten wood, the band gave way, the lid splintering. A tremor ran through my hands. A chill unrelated to the air traced its way down my spine. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a cylinder of aged parchment, rolled tight and nestled beside it. A small cloth-wrapped object. Unwrapping it revealed a crude metal medallion, heavily tarnished, bearing an indistinct design. I carefully unrolled the parchment. Cryptic markings covered its surface, lines, shapes, suggesting a primitive map. Certain contours seemed to vaguely echo the local topography. No familiar script, only alien symbols and a small sketch depicting a mound or hill, surmounted by another symbol. An archaic clue, perhaps, to something larger hidden long ago. Dirt-streaked and sweating despite the cool air, I remained crouched beside the unearthed box. A sudden rustling from the direction of the main path sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. Panic flared. Discovery meant questions I couldn't possibly answer. Snapping the lid shut, I stuffed the parchment and medallion into my jacket pockets, shoved the box out of sight behind the mausoleum wall, and hastily refilled the hole, tamping the earth down. Grabbing the shovel, I hurried to the front of the mausoleum, just as a maintenance truck rumbled past on the road outside. My hands trembled with the near miss, and the dawning realization: the stones had guided me. In the ensuing days, snatched moments were devoted to studying the parchment. The medallion, cleaned gently, revealed its etched secret, a circle contained within a triangle. Holding the cool metal felt strangely significant. The nightly migrations of the tombstones continued, now forming more intricate, almost geometric arrangements. Arcs, partial circles. Witnessing these silent shifts still tightened my chest, sometimes accompanied by the faintest grinding sound, instantly swallowed by the quiet. An attempt to share my observations, my sketches, with a part-time helper was met with baffled concern, a query about my well-being. The gulf between my reality and his was too vast. Secrecy, I decided, was the only course. The parchment and medallion remained locked away at home. Comparing the parchment's lines to an old town map from the library archives yielded tentative correlations. The cemetery itself seemed central, and another mark corresponded plausibly to a low hill nearby. Another buried cache. Unease warred with compulsion. The thought of venturing alone to that hill, shovel in hand, filled me with a nameless dread. Meanwhile, the stones persisted. Their latest configuration formed a distinct vector, pointing beyond the cemetery walls, urging me onward. I felt ensnared, obsessed, compelled to follow this spectral trail. One evening, flashlight beam cutting the dusk, I hiked the short distance to the indicated hill. I found a clearing matching the parchment's sketch. The ground felt firm. No obvious signs of disturbance met my eye. Pacing the small space, flashlight probing the shadows, tension coiled in my shoulders. The wind sighed through the trees, the darkness pressing close. Nothing. Returning to the cemetery later that night, mind abuzz with unanswered questions. I found the stones shifted once more, now aligned along the main walkway. Those familiar drag marks scored the dirt. Following the path, beam dancing from stone to stone, I stopped before a large marker that had moved a good 6 inches since morning. My hand traced its cold, rough surface, and then I saw it, near the base, almost obscured by lichen, an inscription I'd never registered before. Not a name, not a date, but a symbol. A small circle inside a triangle. The same symbol from the parchment, from the medallion. A surge of electrifying certainty flooded me. My palms grew damp. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Rubbing my eyes, I checked again. It was undeniably there. The connection snapped into place. The stones, the map, the medallion, all speaking the same silent language. They weren't just moving, they were communicating, guided by an unseen hand, leading me. Glancing around at the profound stillness, the silence felt charged, broken only by the frantic drumming of my own heart. I remain here, tethered to this place, performing the familiar daytime rituals. But nightfall brings a heightened awareness, an acceptance of the impossible. The headstones move. I cannot fathom the how or the why, but the evidence is irrefutable. I see it. I feel its pull. Each subtle shift seems to draw me closer to a secret interred for generations. The box behind the mausoleum, the cryptic parchment, the symbolic medallion, pieces of a puzzle far larger than myself, a puzzle I'm now inextricably part of. My flashlight, shovel, and the map reside in my car, waiting for the pattern to resolve, to reveal the next X on this subterranean map. Every glance towards the old stone sends a prickle across my scalp, quickens my pulse. Fresh marks in the earth reaffirm what my rational mind still struggles to grasp. Sanity feels precarious, yet the reality of the moving stones is undeniable. And they are not finished, not by a long shot. They are guiding me patiently, inexorably, towards something that has slept in this ground for centuries. I've made a strange peace with the knowledge that this secret yearns for the light. Now I simply wait for the final piece to slide, silently, into place. Tomorrow morning I will check the rows anew. I will record the changes. I will follow where they lead. Those stones have messages yet to deliver, and I intend to decipher every last one. Silence possesses a peculiar alchemy, the power to transmute tranquility into terror within heartbeats. One moment, the campsite's hush was a balm. The fire's soft percussion, the sighing conversation of leaves, the creek's distant murmur weaving a lullaby. The next, triggered by the simple act of parting the tent flap, the night inverted. The air grew dense, a palpable weight pressing in, and the cherished isolation curdled into something sharp-edged, a confinement demanding escape. Rising in the dead of night hadn't been the plan. We were fugitives from routine, just myself and a handful of companions seeking solace deep within the woods. The agenda was elemental: canvas shelters, sustenance coaxed from flame, the vast, indifferent gaze of the stars. We'd sought out wilderness profound, miles from any kindred flicker of firelight, guided by Reese. My closest friend, he'd unearthed this sanctuary online, promising an immersion, nature unfiltered. Initially, his promise held. Perfection, stark and simple. But now, adrift outside my nylon shell, the fire a fading ember pulse at my back. Regret coiled cold in my gut. I drifted towards the embers, letting the warmth ghost across my skin, a futile ward against the unease scaling my spine. The forest was unnervingly mute. That was the crux. One never appreciates the wood's nocturnal symphony, the insectile hum, the far-off cry of some unseen creature, until it ceases utterly. This was not quiet. It was an absence so profound it felt like a presence. Then I registered them. Reese had mentioned impressions in the dirt earlier, dismissively attributed to some phantom hiker preceding our arrival. Now, illuminated by the fire's dying breath, fresh tracks inscribed a path around our tents. My certainty fractured. They were unnervingly large, dwarfing our own boot marks, and numerous, suggesting a prolonged vigil while we slept. A frantic drumming began against my ribs as I knelt, tracing the edge of one depression. It plunged deep, far deeper than mere passage could explain. And their pattern wasn't haphazard. They formed a deliberate, possessive perimeter, as if their maker had paced, observing. Straightening, my skin prickled with that primal certainty of unseen eyes fixed upon my back. I pivoted slowly, my gaze sweeping the Stygian depths beyond the fire's hesitant glow. Nothing stirred, yet the sensation of being scrutinized remained, a physical pressure. Drawing a ragged breath, I crept to Reese's tent, whispering his name against the canvas. "Reese, wake up." A muffled groan answered, the rustle of his sleeping bag. "Munch, time is it?" "Don't know," I breathed, eyes darting nervously into the surrounding black. "Just get out here, now." Some tremor in my voice must have pierced his drowsiness. Seconds later, Reese emerged, blinking away sleep, his expression fogged with confusion. "What's going on?" I gestured wordlessly at the tracks. His features slackened, paling visibly as his gaze followed the disturbing circuit they described. He stood frozen for a long moment, his eyes flicking from the marked earth to the impenetrable wall of trees, as if bracing for an eruption of movement. "An animal, you think?" I asked, the words hollow, already knowing his answer. He shook his head, his voice low and taut. "No. No beast moves with such cold geometry. This is methodical." A clammy chill traced my nape. The unspoken thought hung heavy between us. Someone or something had stood sentinel while we dreamed, watching, waiting. "We need Finn and Maya," Rhys murmured, his voice barely audible above the fire's crackle. I nodded, propelled by a shared, urgent fear. We moved swiftly, rousing the other two. Initial sleepy protests dissolved the instant their eyes focused on the prince, grogginess evaporating, replaced by the same icy dread that gripped me. "What in God's name?" Finn breathed, his eyes wide saucers locked onto the tracks. "Who'd be out here?" "That's just it," Rhys countered, his gaze restlessly probing the darkness. "I don't think it was someone." Maya hugged herself, shivering despite the night's relative mildness. "So, we can't just sit here." She was right. The prospect of burrowing back into our tents, knowing what had circled us, was unthinkable. Yet what recourse did we have? The darkness was absolute, the path back to the car a serpentine memory. Fleeing now might court a danger far greater than waiting. We clustered near the fire, a frantic council held in hushed tones. All the while, the conviction of being watched intensified, an unseen audience breathing just past the fire's hesitant glow. The author of those tracks lurking, patient. Then cleaving the unnatural stillness, a sharp crack from the woods, like bone snapping underfoot. We froze as one, heads snapping towards the sound. It came again, closer. Another brittle report, followed by the distinct cadence of footfalls crushing dry leaves. The steps were slow, measured, as if their owner had shed all concern for stealth. I fumbled for the flashlight in my pack, thumbed it on, and sliced a beam into the oppressive dark. The light pierced the immediate veil of trees, but was swallowed whole beyond, revealing only deeper layers of shadow. "What is that?" Finn whispered, his voice a threadbare sound. "Don't know," Rhys muttered, his eyes stark with fear. "But we're leaving. Right now." No further words were needed. Snatching essential gear, we moved, a tight knot of fear propelled into the night. Behind us, the footsteps amplified, gaining insistence, settling into a rhythm that seemed to mock our pace. Periodically, I'd risk a backward glance, sweeping the flashlight beam through the trees. Always nothing. Only the oppressive weight of something, just beyond perception, waiting. We pushed onward, faster, our own passage loud, a brittle counterpoint to our frantic heartbeats. The trail lay just beyond the creek, yet each stride felt agonizingly long. My pulse hammered in my ears. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. It sounded again. Not distant now, but terribly near. Another snap, then a low guttural resonance. Almost a growl, yet fundamentally wrong. It vibrated with a quality I'd never heard from any earthly creature, sending a fresh wave of ice through my veins. I spun, flashlight beam stabbing backward. Emptiness. No movement, no shape, only the vacant, watchful woods. "Almost there," Rhys urged, his voice strained thin. "Just keep moving." We hit the creek, splashing heedlessly through the cold water. The trail proper opened up on the far bank, a ribbon leading towards the distant parking area. Relief, potent but fleeting, washed over me, because behind us, the footsteps ceased. Abruptly, silence slammed back in, absolute and suffocating. No snaps, no rustles, just a dead void. Then from the trees flanking our right, a flicker of motion. I wrenched the flashlight around. The beam caught a sliver of movement, a fleeting silhouette, unnaturally tall, dark, melting back between the ancient trunks. Gone before my eyes could truly register it, but the imprint remained. It was there, and it saw us. "Run!" Reese roared. We bolted. Down the path we sprinted, lungs burning, legs screaming protest. Behind us, the crashing pursuit resumed, faster now, audibly closing the distance. I didn't look back again. My world narrowed to the frantic dance of the flashlight beam on the path ahead, the desperate rhythm of our flight. Finally, through a haze of panic and exhaustion that felt like an eternity, the clearing materialized. The angular shapes of our cars. Without breaking stride, we flung gear haphazardly into the nearest trunk, scrambled inside, slammed and locked doors. Reese jammed the key, the engine roared to life, and we fishtailed away, gravel spitting from the tires as we tore down the access road. No one spoke on the long drive back. The silence in the car was a heavy shroud, thick with unspoken terror. Only miles later, when the wilderness was a distant memory swallowed by the night, did I force myself to check the rearview mirror. Nothing but empty road receding into the vast, indifferent darkness of the woods. Yet the feeling endures, an indelible certainty etched onto my memory. Whatever hunted us in that profound quiet remains, patient, watchful, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to trespass upon its domain. And I will never, ever go back to learn its name. There's an undeniable gravity to places abandoned by time, a spectral resonance that pulls at something deep within me. Perhaps it's the echo of lives concluded, ghosts of routine suspended within decaying walls, or simply the profound silence where vibrant existence once thrived. So, when the derelict shack materialized amidst the deep woods, a ruin half digested by the wilderness, prudence should have been my guide. Yet curiosity is its own insidious compass, often pointing toward the very shadows instinct warns against. I was navigating solo through an untamed expanse of forest, a territory previously unknown to my boots. Autumn held sway, the air crystalline, each footfall punctuated by the satisfying fracture of fallen leaves. My intention hadn't been to stray far from the established artery of the trail, but then a fissure in the foliage snagged my attention. A path, faint as a forgotten memory, insinuating itself between the ancient trunks. Overgrown, suggesting seasons, perhaps years of disuse, its mere veiled presence was an invitation. I reasoned it might curve back, a lost loop or an old timber route. Regardless, my feet were already turning, answering the unspoken dare. The further I pressed inward, the more profound the hush became. The ambient birdsong that had earlier painted the air dissolved, leaving a vacuum, an unnerving stillness. Trees ascended, their boughs interlocking far overhead, weaving a dense canopy that starved the undergrowth of sunlight, stretching skeletal shadows across my way. It wasn't long before the structure revealed itself, nestled like a rotten tooth between the towering timbers, barely discernible through the grasping underbrush. Decades of neglect were etched into its very being. The roofline bowed precariously. The timbered skin, bleached gray and festooned with moss and invasive vines, spoke of surrender. A jagged void in one wall, where glass once sat, permitted the wind's passage, its breath rattling loose planks like dry bones. I halted, an involuntary shiver tracing my spine. A dissonance emanated from the place. It wasn't merely its dereliction, its slow consumption by the forest, but an attendant sensation. The very atmosphere around it felt altered, imbued with a palpable weight, as though the woods themselves held their breath, observing. My rational mind insisted, just a forgotten shelter, remnant of some long-gone woodsman or trapper. Yet the unease coiled tighter around my neck the longer I gazed upon it. Minutes stretched thin as I stood suspended between retreat and approach. Logic screamed retreat, urging me back toward the familiar trail, toward forgetting this anomaly. But another current, a deeper, more primal inquisitiveness, exerted its pull. What enigma did I expect to unravel? Relics of a bygone life? Narrative fragments embedded in the decay? Or was it merely the lure of the unknown, a deviation from the hike's quiet rhythm? Whatever the motive, my legs carried me forward, boots whispering through the tangled growth toward the cabin's threshold. Closer proximity amplified its decrepitude. The door sagged, clinging tenuously to warped hinges, while the porch steps beneath it had succumbed entirely to rot. Through skeletal gaps in the planks, I glimpsed an interior steeped in shadow, darkness pooling in the corners as if resisting expulsion. Drawing a breath that felt inadequate in the heavy air, I mounted the porch. The wood groaned under my weight, the sound amplified, obscene in the surrounding quietude. A pause, a final moment of hesitation. Then my hand reached out, pushing against the door's weathered surface. It yielded with a protracted groan, swinging inward to unveil a compact, desolate chamber. Dust lay thick as velvet, mingling with brittle leaves blown in through the breaches. What meager furnishings remained were splintered and draped in cobwebs. A table listed centrally, bereft of one leg. A solitary chair lay capsized, evoking a sense of abrupt departure. I crossed the threshold, the air instantly colder, dense with the miasma of damp wood and slow rot, as if the structure hoarded the chill of countless forgotten winters. My own breath plumed before me as I moved, my steps imprinting the thick mantle of dust coating the floorboards. There was little to catalog. The cabin was starkly barren, save for a scattering of rusted implements and the corroded husk of a lantern dangling near the entrance. Yet the inherent wrongness persisted. It was too silent, too profoundly still. It felt paradoxically recent, touched, despite the layers of neglect suggesting utter desertion. I drifted toward the broken window, gazing out at the impassive forest. Trees stood sentinel, their branches swaying with hypnotic slowness. But the sensation of being scrutinized had only intensified since I'd entered, as if the woods possessed myriad unseen eyes, waiting for my departure, or perhaps more chillingly, for my permanence. It was then that my gaze snagged on an anomaly. There, etched into the dust near the room's far corner, were footprints. Not mine. I hadn't ventured to that side. They looked unnervingly fresh, their edges crisp against the settled grime, as though someone had traversed that very spot mere moments before my arrival. I froze, my pulse accelerating to a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The prints tracked from the shadowed corner toward the doorway, then vanished. Whoever belonged to them hadn't lingered. My eyes darted around the room, half expecting a figure to coalesce from the gloom, observing me. Nothing. An abrupt gust surged through the shattered window, swirling the dust into miniature phantoms. The door creaked again, nudged slightly ajar as if by an unseen touch. A prickle of primal fear crawled across my skin. I took an instinctive step back, every nerve fiber shrieking, "Leave!" I turned toward the exit, poised for flight, but a sound arrested me. Faint, almost subliminal beneath the cabin's groans and sighs, yet undeniably present. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tapping, like knuckles gently rapping on wood. Initially, I dismissed it. The wind, a loose branch brushing the exterior. But as I strained to listen, the tapping persisted, grew fractionally louder, acquired a deliberate cadence. It originated from below. My gaze dropped to the floorboards, breath seizing in my throat. The tapping was insistent now, resonating upward through the aged wood, as if something, someone, resided beneath the cabin, patiently knocking for release. I recoiled further, heart hammering, the sound seeming to amplify with each frantic beat. What lay beneath I couldn't fathom, nor did I wish to. Thought abandoned me. Pure instinct took over. I spun and fled, bursting out onto the dilapidated porch. The wind had risen to a howl, tearing through the trees, branches thrashing and groaning like tormented limbs. I didn't dare look back. I ran, feet stumbling, pounding the overgrown trail, breath tearing raggedly from my lungs. The cabin dissolved behind me, engulfed by the roiling trees and the keening wind. Yet the tapping, its persistent rhythm, pursued me, echoing in the chambers of my mind long after I burst onto the main trail. I didn't cease running until the familiar shape of my car appeared on the gravel verge, and even then, my hands trembled violently as I fumbled for the keys. Inside, doors locked. I drove away with reckless speed, the forest diminishing in the rearview mirror like a receding nightmare. I revisit that cabin often in the landscape of my thoughts. I dissect the possibilities of that sound. An animal trapped, a structural quirk, auditory hallucination born of solitude and suggestion. Yet a certainty persists, cold and unshakable, deep beneath the rationalizations. Something was undeniably there. Something waiting in the subterranean dark. And it was knocking. The solace of my nocturnal wanderings had always felt absolute. A private communion with slumbering avenues and vacant pavements. Under the sodium glow, amidst the city's distant, muffled drone, the world seemed sealed away, leaving me adrift in a bubble of profound stillness. A quietude bordering on benediction. But that illusion shattered on the night I veered onto an unfamiliar lane. The comforting silence curdling into something sharp and cold. A dread I hadn't tasted in years. My intent was simple. A brief circuit through the neighborhood's arteries to quiet the hum within my own head. Midnight loomed, or perhaps had already passed, the air crisping towards autumn, a gentle bite against the skin. I cherished these excursions for their suspended quality, the world holding its breath between dusk and dawn. No clamor, no demands, only the steady cadence of my soles on the asphalt, the occasional sibilance of wind threading through unseen leaves. street lamps cast elongated, wavering specters across my path, their light intermittent, stuttering. Houses stood sentinel, obsidian windows reflecting nothing, their inhabitants surrendered to dreams. It was a realm of predictable repose, suburban, unchanging. Yet this particular night resonated with an unfamiliar frequency. Between two darkened dwellings, almost swallowed by shadow, gaped a narrow tributary I'd never noticed. Unlit, it beckoned like a throat. Trees lining its entrance bowed inwards, skeletal branches interlacing to form a low archway into profound blackness. A pause, a flicker of hesitation. Primal curiosity warred with a deeper unease. Just another street, I reasoned, like countless others. But the air here felt different, denser, weighted, as if the darkness itself possessed a physical pressure. Logic urged retreat, a return to known paths. But my feet, traitorous, had already crossed the threshold, carrying me into the unlit maw before conscious thought could intervene. The deeper I ventured, the more absolute the silence became. The city's ambient murmur evaporated entirely, leaving only the rasp of my own breathing, the soft grit of my shoes on unseen gravel. Ancient, towering houses flanked the way, their windows' vacant sockets staring into the gloom. No glimmer of light, no hint of motion, no signifier of life. Only an unnerving sensation, persistent and growing. The feeling of being watched, as if the very structures lining the path held unseen eyes within their shadowed recesses. My pace involuntarily quickened, propelled by an unnamed urgency. The lane stretched onward, twisting unexpectedly, defying the familiar geometry of the neighborhood lodged in my mind. It felt misplaced, an anomaly, a path conjured solely for my trespass. Then came the sound, initially faint, a mere whisper on the still air, a delicate rhythmic percussion, like knuckles tapping softly against old wood. I froze, straining to locate its source, but it seemed ubiquitous and directionless. My gaze swept the empty lane. Nothing. No one. A loose shutter, perhaps? An old gate oscillating in a phantom breeze? Rationalizations offered scant comfort. As I resumed walking, the tapping intensified, acquiring a deliberate, steady cadence. Footfalls shadowing mine, matching my rhythm just beyond the periphery of sight. Again, I stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. Slowly, deliberately, I turned, half expecting a form coalescing from the shadows. Behind me lay only the silent, brooding houses and the narrow path receding into impenetrable night. The tapping ceased the instant I stopped moving. I stood suspended in that profound quiet, listening only to the frantic tempo of my own pulse, wrestling with the conviction that I was utterly, terrifyingly, not alone. I began walking again, faster now. The tapping resumed, louder, more insistent, dogging my heels. Panic tightened its grip. My walk escalated to a jog, breath tearing in ragged bursts. Houses melted into blurred, monstrous shapes, their windows like vacant maws. Orientation dissolved. I only knew the imperative to escape whatever pursued me. The lane coiled, doubled back. The houses looming taller, more distorted in the oppressive dark. A horrifying sense that I was trapped, run in circles within an impossible, unfolding maze. And then I saw it. Ahead, limned against the deeper black, a figure stood motionless at the edge of the pavement. utterly still, watching. Details remained elusive. Just a tall, slender silhouette, the head canted slightly, inquisitively. A leaden weight plunged through my gut. Every instinct shrieked reversal, flight, but my limbs were locked, roots anchoring me to the spot as I stared. The figure remained impassive, silent, simply waiting. The tapping erupted anew, impossibly loud, seeming to originate right beside my ear. I whirled around. Nothing. Only the vacant lane stretching back into the darkness. My gaze snapped back to where the figure had stood. Gone. The pavement empty. The houses dark and silent once more. I didn't linger. Turning, I fled, sprinting down the warped street, lungs burning. The tapping gave chase, echoing through the night, accelerating, a frantic percussion hunting me through the labyrinth. Ahead, a familiar, blessed radiance. A street lamp marking the main thoroughfare. Sanctuary. I burst from the oppressive confines of the lane onto the familiar road. Heart slamming against my sternum, legs trembling uncontrollably. The instant my feet touched the illuminated pavement, the tapping vanished. Silence reclaimed the night. I risked a glance backward. The narrow passage I had traversed was simply not there. The space between the houses was solid shadow, seamless, as if the lane had been swallowed whole, or perhaps had never existed at all. I stood there a long time, gasping for air, grappling with the impossible event. No explanation surfaced, no logic could dispel the icy residue of fear clinging to me. The street was gone. The figure vanished, but the spectral sensation of being followed lingered. A persistent shadow imprinted on my mind. My nocturnal walks ceased that night. The metronome of my sneakers against the pavement, a familiar pulse, abruptly fractured, a sharp crack, like bone snapping somewhere in the trees behind me. I stumbled, momentum lost, a cold fist clenching around my heart. Viridian Park, usually my sanctuary from the city's relentless thrum, suddenly exhaled menace in the deepening twilight. A furtive glance over my shoulder snagged a dark shape melting behind the broad trunk of an oak. In that instant, the familiar solace of my evening run twisted into a harrowing pursuit. My name is Ilara. This devotion to the rhythm of breath and limb, I never imagined it could lure me into the abyss of such a night. Running has always been my anchor. There's a liberation in the body's fluid motion, the measured draw and release of air. The world softening at the periphery as the path ahead sharpens into focus. It is my release, my moving meditation, the way I scour my mind clean after the long siege of office hours. Viridian Park had been my terrain since arriving in the city 3 years prior. Its arteries, its capillaries, I knew them intimately, from the thronged plazas near the gates to the hushed arboreal veins deeper within its green heart. Evenings usually found me on well-lit, populated roads. Prudence dictated it. But today, frayed nerves craved the park's deeper solitude, its untamed corners, a choice seeded in stress, soon to blossom into terror. Dusk was bleeding across the sky as I entered, painting the lawns in long, distorted shadows. The usual tapestry of joggers, dog walkers, and lingering tourists was unraveling, threads pulling loose towards home. I drank in the quiet, the cool caress of the air, and turned onto my favored trail. Perhaps 2 miles dissolved beneath my feet before the first tendril of unease curled up my spine. Subtle initially, a prickle of awareness, the disquieting sense of eyes fixed on my back. Paranoia, I told myself, shaking it off. Yet rounding a curve shrouded in low-hanging branches, I heard it. Footfalls, a counter-rhythm to my own, trailing behind. I lengthened my stride, instinct demanding distance. The unseen steps quickened, mirroring mine. My pulse leaped, adrenaline surging ahead of exertion. Risking another look, I saw him, a figure maybe 50 yards back, locked onto my pace. Then came the definitive crack of that twig, and amorphous dread solidified into certainty. Not a fellow runner, not coincidence, pursuit. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded me. Vulnerability screamed its presence. Alone, deep within the park's secluded embrace, the sun hemorrhaging light below the horizon. No one near enough to hear. My mind scrabbled for fragments of long-ago self-defense lessons. Keys flared between knuckles, strike eyes, strike groin, yell, fire, not help. People respond to fire. Futile strategies, all predicated on proximity, on a fight I couldn't yet reach. I plunged off the path, gambling on the denser woods. Branches whipped my face, a stinging lattice against my skin as I crashed through the undergrowth. My lungs burned, pushed beyond any previous limit. Behind me I heard him gaining, the relentless crunch of leaves underfoot. Closer, faster. His longer legs devoured the ground I fought to cover. Desperation birthed a new tactic. Abandoning the deepening woods, I pivoted sharply, aiming back towards the park's more frequented arteries. Light, people, safety. If I could just reach them. But he anticipated the shift. As I burst from the tree line onto a wider gravel path, he materialized, a dark barrier blocking my escape. In the failing light, his form resolved. Tall, sinewy, clad entirely in black. A mask obscured his face, rendering him anonymous, archetypal. But his eyes, visible above the fabric, held me captive. Cold, predatory chips of obsidian, gleaming with a hunger that turned my blood to ice. Nowhere left to flee, little bird, his voice rasped, a low growl that vibrated down my spine. I retreated, eyes darting, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. Trapped. Him before me, a steep, eroded embankment plunging towards a hidden creek behind. A decision made in the sliver of a second between heartbeats. I turned, half running, half sliding down the treacherous slope. Reckless, perilous, my only chance. Above I heard his curse, then the scrape of his own descent. The creek water, shallow but swift, struck like ice, a brutal shock that paradoxically surged through me as pure survival instinct. It propelled me up the opposing bank, mud sucking at my sneakers, sodden clothes weighing me down like leaden shrouds. I ran blindly now, direction irrelevant, consumed by the singular imperative, distance. The park transformed into a disorienting maze of looming silhouettes and shifting shadows. Every rustle, every snap, sent jolts of terror through my exhausted frame. How long did I run? Time warped, stretched thin. Minutes felt like hours. Lungs aflame, legs trembling like overstrummed wires, yet fear was the relentless engine. The stark knowledge that stopping meant oblivion. Then salvation flickered ahead, the distant glow of streetlights marking the park's edge. Safety, tangible, tantalizingly close. A few 100 yards more. I forced my protesting muscles onward, ignoring the searing stitch in my side. My foot snagged an exposed root, a hidden snare. I pitched forward, landing hard. Pain exploded in my ankle. Trying to rise sent fresh waves of agony. Not broken, but twisted. Useless. I could hear him approaching, his breathing heavy but controlled. He wasn't spent like I was. He had paced himself, toyed with me. His shadow fell over me, a final eclipse. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But then, voices. Laughter and conversation drifted from the street. A group entering the park. My eyes snapped open. My pursuer froze, his masked face swiveling from me to the approaching sounds. Opportunity flared. Summoning a final reservoir of strength, I screamed. Not words, just sound. Raw, primal, torn from the depths of my terror and pain. The voices ceased abruptly. Shouts of alarm followed, the thud of running feet drawing nearer. My attacker uttered a final venomous curse, then melted back into the park's consuming darkness. The aftermath remains a fractured mosaic. The wail of sirens, the measured calm of paramedics, questions I answered through chattering teeth, too shaken to form coherent narratives. Hospital lights, the diagnosis, exhaustion, dehydration, a severely sprained ankle. The police took my statement, offered assurances of increased patrols, tempered by the reality that without a clear description, the odds were long. In the ensuing days and weeks, the trauma cast long shadows. The city I had embraced felt alien, menacing. Every corner concealed a potential threat. Every passing stranger wore the ghost of his mask. Running, especially in the park, felt impossible. A violation of a sanctuary now defiled. Slowly, painstakingly, aided by therapy's gentle scaffolding and the unwavering support of friends and family, I began to rebuild. Self-defense became more than a forgotten lesson. It became intensive training, muscle memory honed against fear. A personal alarm, pepper spray, tangible fortifications. Eventually, tentatively, I laced up my running shoes again. Never alone now. Never in the secluded depths. The man who hunted me through the twilight was never found. His shadow still flickers at the edges of my nightmares, a dark presence forever a few strides behind. But I refuse to grant that fear dominion over my life. I am a survivor, not merely a victim. Now, when I run, I carry the acute awareness of the world's sharp edges, especially for women navigating its spaces. But I also carry my strength, my resilience, and an unyielding resolve. Because sometimes the most critical race is the one for your own life, and I am determined to keep winning mine. A miasma of scorched tire hung heavy, a bitter perfume announcing our crippled arrival. The minivan, shuddering like a beast in its death throes, crawled onto the cracked asphalt canvas of the sundown lodge. What began as a tapestry of promised adventure, laughter, canyons, the open road, had unraveled thread by thread into mechanical betrayals and navigational curses. Yet the sputtering engine was merely the overture to a far more desolate symphony. I am Ilara, weaver of multiplication tables and spelling lists for third graders back in the urban labyrinth of Chicago. Beside me sat Julian, my husband, his knuckles white on the wheel. In the back, nestled amongst pillows and fraying patience, were Iris, 10 years of bright curiosity now dimmed by boredom, and Leo, 8, his usual ebullience replaced by a weary slump. Months we dreamt this pilgrimage westward, a sun-drenched escape towards the vast, striated majesty of the Grand Canyon, charting a course dotted with curiosities and kitsch. But the map betrayed us, or perhaps the land itself resisted, somewhere deep in Nevada's barren heart. Our faithful chariot, once humming with promise, began its discordant lament, guttural groans from its iron gut, a palsy in the steering, culminating in plumes of gray breath ghosting from beneath the hood. We crept onward, whispering pleas to any deity listening, searching the heat-hazed horizon for sanctuary. Then shimmering through the waves of heat, a sign materialized. The Sundown Lodge. Less a beacon, more a relic bleached by sun and time. Its paint curled away like sunburnt skin, and the vacancy sign blinked a fractured neon stutter. A derelict angel in the wasteland, perhaps. But we were supplicants, stripped of choice, ready to kneel at any altar offering respite. While Julian negotiated our surrender at the counter, I ushered Iris and Leo into the lobby's stale embrace. The air was thick, layered with the ghosts of stale tobacco and a palpable scent of resignation. Presiding over this dim domain was a man seemingly carved from driftwood, ancient and weathered. His eyes, clouded pools reflecting the dim light, appraised us with an unnerving blend of detached interest and some other unreadable current. "Welcome, travelers," his voice rasped, dry as the desert wind. He slid a key across the worn formica. "Number 13. Plumbing sings its own tune sometimes. Don't you mind it?" Murmuring thanks, we navigated the corridor, the children's protests echoing dully against the oppressive heat. Our refuge, number 13, offered Spartan solace. Twin beds draped in faded florals, a television humming with static ghosts, a bathroom whose avocado fixtures screamed of decades past. Julian's call to a mechanic yielded only the promise of a morning visit, leaving us marooned. So we nested. I spun tales for Iris and Leo, their eyelids heavying, while Julian wrestled with the television's blizzard of 5 elusive channels. Midnight draped the world outside in velvet silence, broken only by Julian's rhythmic breathing and the children's deep slumber. Then a sound intruded, a muffled thud from the adjacent room. Another, a scraping, dragging resonance like heavy objects being rearranged by reluctant hands. Who would shift burdens at such an hour? Dismissing it proved futile. The disturbance persisted, amplified by the stillness. My attempt to reach the front desk met only a dead, indifferent tone. Annoyance warred with a nascent tremor of unease. Shrugging on a thin robe, I slipped out into the surprisingly cool desert air, a stark balm after the room's fog. The path to the office lay bathed in the weak, intermittent glow of the failing sign. A profound emptiness struck me. Ours was the solitary vehicle squatting beneath the lights, a metal carcass abandoned. The office itself was a void, dark and unresponsive to my rapping knuckles. The chill that traced my spine now wasn't born of the night air. A wrongness settled, heavy and suffocating. Turning, I hastened back, a frantic pulse drumming in my ears. My key met resistance. The lock turned, yet the door remained stubbornly shut, barricaded from within. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I hammered on the wood, my voice cracking Julian's name into the night. Abruptly, the door yielded, swinging inward. I staggered across the threshold, not into Julian's arms, but into the unnerving presence of Silas, the ancient proprietor. "Tsk, tsk," he clucked, his voice a low, gravelly hum that vibrated with chilling calm. "Can't permit our guests to wander. Upsets the schedule." A scream built in my throat, instantly stifled by a rough hand clamped across my mouth from behind. I thrashed, a wild animal caught in a snare, but the grip was iron. As my vision adjusted to the room's gloom, the true horror crystallized. Julian, Iris, Leo lashed together on one bed, their mouths sealed, eyes vast pools reflecting sheer terror. Silas emitted a dry chuckle, a sound like stones tumbling in a crypt. "Seems you chose poorly for a breakdown," he observed conversationally. "No matter. You'll be part of the fold soon. A permanent addition." The ensuing hours bled into a phantasmagoria of dread. Shadows detached themselves from the desert night, coalescing into figures. The town's populace we gathered from their hushed, fervent whispers. They spoke of appeasement, of a parched deity dwelling beneath the sands, demanding tribute. We were the offering. Rough hands propelled us out into the darkness, towards a fissure in the earth, a hidden cavern pulsing with unseen energy. Its rock face wept strange ochre sigils, illuminated by flickering torches that cast dancing, demonic shadows. At the heart of this subterranean chamber stood a primitive altar of unhewn stone, stained dark with history, while our captors moved with ritualistic purpose, arranging implements of sacrifice. My mind raced, clawing desperately for an escape from this waking nightmare. Salvation came from the smallest hands. Iris, ever nimble, had worked one wrist free of its bindings. Seizing a moment when attention wavered, she darted forward, snatching a wickedly curved ceremonial blade from a nearby devotee. The sudden, sacrilegious act shattered the ritual's solemnity. In the ensuing pandemonium, shouts, curses, scrambling figures, Julian tore at our bonds. Then we bolted, out of the suffocating cavern, into the vast, indifferent expanse of the desert night. Behind us, the pursuit began, their enraged cries swallowed by the wind. Sand gave way beneath our pounding feet, the frigid air searing our desperate lungs. But terror lent us wings we never knew we possessed. Time dissolved. We ran through an eternity measured only by aching muscles and ragged breaths. The landscape offered no landmarks, only an endless rolling darkness under a canopy of cold stars. Doubt gnawed. Were we merely circling back towards our doom? Then, a flicker. Distant, improbable lights pricked the horizon. A truck stop, humming with the mundane electricity of the ordinary world. A sanctuary in the void. We fell through its doors like refugees, ragged and wild-eyed, stunning the few late-night haulers nursing coffee. Breathless, fragmented words tumbled out, painting a scene of impossible horror. Sirens soon sliced the night. State troopers, later joined by federal agents, descended upon the scene. Yet the sundown lodge stood vacant under the interrogation lights. Silas and his congregation evaporated like morning mist. The cavern, when rediscovered miles away, held only the mute stone altar and the unsettling hieroglyphs staining its walls. An entire community, it seemed, had simply dissolved back into the dust and shadows from whence it came. The subsequent weeks blurred into a haze of sterile offices, recounted horrors, and the slow, painful knitting back together of shattered normalcy. We learned fragments, whispers of local lore, tales of vanishings along this desolate highway, of a phantom settlement glimpsed only by the doomed. Official reports gathered dust. The case file remained open, a testament to an enigma the rational world could not penetrate. Did the desert heat conjure a collective delusion? The question sometimes surfaces in the quiet hours, but the answer lies stark in the two old shadows within Iris and Leo's eyes, in the ghost pressure of bindings on my own skin. It was real. Our wanderlust is extinguished now, replaced by an instinct for sanctuary. The open road whispers only of exposure, of isolation. We cling to the predictable grid of Chicago, finding solace in brick and pavement. Yet even within these city walls, sleep offers incomplete refuge. A sudden noise can resurrect Silas's dry laugh. A low hum can morph into the memory of ritualistic chanting, my heart hammering against my ribs. That immensity of sand and silence guards its mysteries jealously. Whatever malevolent sentience festers in that forsaken corner of Nevada remains, patient, watchful, awaiting the next weary traveler, the next faltering engine. Heed this. Should your journey take you through that sun-scoured emptiness, should a sign promise lodging where only emptiness seems to reign, accelerate. Press on. Some vacancies are invitations to oblivion. Some doors are better left unopened. We endured, changed irrevocably. The bright, untroubled map of our lives is forever marred by that night's cartography of fear. A certain lightness has fled, replaced by the weight of knowing such shadows exist. But we endured together. Julian, Iris, Leo, and I, 4 points defining a space the darkness could not fully conquer. That fragile geometry is our strength now. Facing the abyss bound us in ways simpler joys never could. And together, step by cautious step, we navigate the path ahead.